I'm very happy to report that I'm back in New York City. If you notice, ignore the ring light reflection. I have a different photo behind me. Joan Didion is gone. Sadly, I bought that photograph for my daughter, Carrie, who is obsessed with Joan Didion, even has a tattoo from slouching towards Bethlehem and under her arm. That's another story. Or a Joan Didion quote. I should know what it is. But anyway, so this is a cool photo I bought a number of years ago, and it's kind of pretty. So if you noticed, I wanted to explain. So I wanted to let you all know after this Substack live show, the Katie Couric show, how original. No, Katie Couric Live is what we're calling it. We're going to have Katie After Hours. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to have a little kind of debrief where I really let loose and tell you what I think, and I might even have a cocktail to keep me company and to loosen me up. Even though it's clearly I'm pretty loose already, not that kind of loose, but you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, here are some of the stories you all we've been paying attention to this week over at Katie Couric Media that we wanted to share with you in case you've missed it, but missed them because God knows there's a new news story every minute, it seems. So here we go. The latest headlines include Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth. You're going to love this. He reposted a video of that pastor named Doug Wilson, and Wilson was saying he believes women shouldn't vote. Thanks so much, Doug. The clip was from an interview this Wilson gentleman or individual did with Pamela Brown at CNN, and he laid out a number of really alarming / disgusting views in addition to prohibiting women from voting under his eye, Doug. He defended previous comments he made saying there was mutual affection between slaves and their masters, and that planting a church in D.C. is part of his plan to turn America into a Christian nation, adding, quote, I'd like to see the town be a Christian town. I'd like to see the state be a Christian state. I'd like to see the nation be a Christian nation. I'd like to see the world be a Christian world. This guy is a serious Christian. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I was raised a Presbyterian, ladies and gentlemen. A Pentagon spokesman issued a statement to NPR that Pete Hegseth is, quote, a proud member of a church affiliated with the Congregation of Reformed Evangelical Churches, which is the church Wilson founded. I'd love to hear what you think about this. It's pretty upsetting, disturbing. I thought it was interesting that some people were complaining that CNN shouldn't platform this guy, so to speak. But I think there are a lot of people out there under the umbrella of Christian nationalism. And I sort of feel like we need to know about it, know that it's happening, and know how many people ascribe to this philosophy. There's another setback on the horizon. I'm not sure if you all have heard about this. I found this very upsetting. 10 years after the Supreme Court legalized same-sex marriage this fall, the justices are going to consider for the first time whether to take up the case. And the case also explicitly asks them to overturn Obergefell versus Hodges. By the way, I interviewed Jim Obergefell in 2015, right? Anyway, here's the deal. This lady named Kim Davis, she's a former Kentucky County clerk. She was jailed for 6 days in 2015 after refusing to issue marriage licenses to a gay couple on religious grounds. She's now claiming the court's decision in Obergefell v. Hodges was, quote, egregiously wrong. She's appealing a $100,000 jury verdict for emotional damages plus $260,000 for attorney fees, and is seen as one of the only Americans who could challenge the precedent. Now, lower courts have dismissed her claims, and most legal experts say it's a long shot, but given the current climate, it feels worthy of attention. This year, at least 9 states have either introduced legislation aimed at blocking new marriage licenses for LGBTQ people or passed resolutions urging the Supreme Court to overturn Obergefell. Her petition argues the issue should be treated the same way the court handled abortion in its overturning of Roe v. Wade. She specifically references Clarence Thomas's explicit call for revisiting Obergefell. I just wanted to mention, I thought it was interesting to note that this Kim Davis has been married 4 times to 3 spouses, according to court records obtained by CBS News in 2015. And now, finally, this other story that really pissed me off, and we're going to be talking more about it in the after show. I'm sure you all have heard about it because I think people who watch this are really interested in the news. So pardon me if I'm repeating what you already know, but it's so aggravating that the White House is conducting a review of Smithsonian Museum exhibitions, materials, and operations leading up to our country's 250th anniversary to ensure the museums align with President Trump's interpretation of American history. As if, like, last time I checked, Donald Trump was not a historian. In a letter sent to the Secretary of the Smithsonian Institution, 3 top White House officials said they want to ensure the museums present the unity, progress, and enduring values that define the American story and reflect the president's executive order calling for, quote, restoring truth and sanity to American history. AKA, this is going to be a whole lot of BS. They're basically erasing history, whitewashing history, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But first, let me bring in our next guest. Hey, by the way, thank you so much for joining us, everyone. So I'm now going to be talking to Katie Fang, and I'm very excited because I've never met Katie, the other Katie, the younger Katie, the smarter Katie too, probably. She's an independent journalist. She's also a trial lawyer. She's a host of the Katie Fang Show on YouTube. She has been closely following the Epstein-Maxwell saga. She's also, uh, is going to give her expert legal opinion on a lot of different topics. So you guys know how technologically challenged I am, but I think I got this. Okay, hold on. Katie is under Katie Fang. That should be pretty simple. So here we go. Here's Katie Fang. Anyway, I'm very excited to talk to her. And I really appreciate her making time for us. And she's one of these journalists like myself and many others who are flocking to Substack because it's a great platform for us to have these conversations that are longer and more in depth. Hello, Katie Fang.
Well, hello, Katie Couric.
I am so happy to meet you. I've been a big fan of yours, was watching you on MSNBC, and so delighted to see you on this platform. And as I say, diversifying your portfolio, which I think all journalists need to do in this day and age. So thank you again, Katie, for doing this. And before I dive into the Epstein-Maxwell thing, which I know you've been, well, first of all, can I ask you some questions? Where are you from? You're a lawyer. Where'd you go to college? Where'd you go to law school? And why'd you get into journalism before we start?
So very quickly, I'm based out of Miami Beach, Florida. So I am a blue dot in a very, very developing red state, I like to say. But it does give me some insight into what's going on in Florida. Florida is kind of, I say, the epicenter of all things crazy, although I sometimes use profanity to describe it, Katie. But it kind of
You
is
can do that on Substack, Katie. It's a beautiful thing.
Trust me, I know. But kind of with Ron DeSantis and the craziness of the Republicans down here, it's a little bit of a petri dish, and it's kind of a test case for some of the insanity that we see that gets, perpetrated everywhere else across the United States, including Donald Trump kind of taking his cues. But anyway, so I am a trained lawyer. I have been a practicing trial lawyer for 25 years. Grew up in Miami, Florida, went away to college at Yale for undergrad, and then came back to go to Miami for law school.
That was my safety school, Yale.
Woo, yeah.
I'm kidding, everyone. That's a joke I always use. Where'd you go to law school? Sorry.
I went to Miami. I came back to Miami for law school.
Oh, that's great. And you decided to, how did you make the switch from law to journalism?
So back in 2005, I was invited by the local CBS affiliate here in Miami to cover the Michael Jackson trial. It was a second pedophilia trial that was based out of California, but I did legal analysis and I started just doing that locally and then nationally. And then over the years, I had a few opportunities to do TV more regularly, but I opted to just hone my craft. I've always told young lawyers, especially, just focus and be really good in what you're doing because it gives you the street credibility to be able to talk about different things later on when you're asked to do analysis. And at the end of 2021, I was approached by then MSNBC president Rashida Jones, who offered me my own TV show. And I was just a legal contributor for the network for a few years, but it was spectacular because not only was it an opportunity to do something like TV full time, which was cool, but also as a first generation Korean American, I thought it was critically important to expand representation. I have a 10-year-old daughter, and for her to be able and others to say, "Look, there's somebody on TV who looks like me," was such a cool opportunity. And so I was able to do that for 3 years and some change, and then they summarily canceled the show,
I
and
know
I
I was
still have.
very upset when they did that, Katie, because I really enjoyed watching you when I got a chance to watch TV. Ironically, I don't watch that much television news anymore. Once in a while, when something big happens, or you know, I just happen to have it on. But I thought you did a terrific job, and I was really disappointed they canceled your show.
I was disappointed, because again, not having the chance. Because right now at MSNBC, they don't have any Asian Americans left for those roles, which I think is a disservice to the communities. But also, I had an incredible team, and Katie, you know this so well, having been in media for many years. We don't do these things by ourselves, and I called it the small but mighty team. We were small,
Hmm.
but we did some incredible content and incredible work. So I was really upset that I wasn't gonna be able to continue to work with them. But I had time left on my contract, but I looked at the kind of the lay of the land, and I said, "I can't sit back and kind of hope to have the chance to be able to have a voice, a platform." And so I left. I left MSNBC. I said, "Thank you for the opportunities, but I have bigger fish to fry over on Substack and on YouTube." So that's how I've ended up where I am in independent media.
That's awesome, and I have to say I'm really enjoying it, and MSNBC is different, but, so many of the networks are pulling their punches when it comes to reporting on Donald Trump, and it's nice to be liberated and to be able to continue to search for truth and give factual information about what's happening in our country and not feel threatened by the corporate ownership, whether it's, ABC, CBS, or NBC for that matter. So I find it quite liberating. Anyway, thank you for indulging me. By the way, I worked in Miami in local news in the early
I
80s.
know.
Yes, yes,
I
everyone.
know.
I am that old, but it was a great training ground for me, and it's such a fascinating place. And you're right, Miami is very different than many other places in Florida, and I think it's actually changed a lot. Because I was there, with Claude Pepper and Lawton Childs, and the state has changed
That
dramatically
is
since
a
I was
different
reporting
era.
there in the early
Yeah,
'80s, the age of Miami Vice, Sonny Crockett and Crockett and Tubbs. Anyway, I
that's
am
right.
so showing my age, everyone. So let's move on and talk about what's happening in the news, Katie.
Yes,
Obviously, President, what I'm also grew up in Arlington, Virginia, right outside Washington, D.C., and lived on Connecticut Avenue in Washington and in Georgetown. So, and still have many people in the D.C. area. So, I'm curious to get your perspective on the fact that Donald Trump declared a national emergency, taking control of the Metropolitan Police Department, deploying 800 National Guard troops to the Capitol, although I understand there will only be like 200 at any given time, to quote, rescue our nation's capital from crime, bloodshed, bedlam, and squalor, and worse. Um, you know, I've been talking to a lot of my friends in the area. Crime statistics have gone down. There are some people, and I've heard people on cable talk about feeling somewhat threatened because of carjackings, et cetera, and some of these young people. That's according to some of the people I've talked to. But I'd love to get your perspective. And, this is not the first time he's called in the National Guard to deal with something in a state. We heard Gavin Newsom was really angry when he deployed the National Guard, but during the ICE raids, and I guess they're still in California at this point. But can you just talk about the legal authority he has or doesn't have to do this, and kind of just what you think of the whole thing?
So it's just a gigantic pretext to be able to perpetrate a campaign of fear and intimidation. But instead of, focusing on just one thing, Trump has decided to escalate it and focus on all things. And he's looking in his own backyard. And what's problematic about him doing this in DC is the climate of fear is the way that somebody like Trump, who is truly trying to install an autocratic regime, this is exactly how legally he goes about doing it. For example, Home Rule Act in DC, there's a specific section, Section 740, that was cited to by Donald Trump as justification legally to be able to basically hijack the Metropolitan PD. He's put operational control of the Metropolitan Police Department in the hands of Pamela Jo Bondi, the Attorney General of the United States. Putting aside the reality that that woman theoretically and ostensibly should have other things and bigger fish to be frying than taking over a local PD. The problem with allowing and permitting Donald Trump to share and spread a falsehood about a state of emergency in DC is such that he gets to do that over and over again. And we've noted that there's a common denominator of this declaration of an emergency state that he uses to justify certain things. For example, he did it for LA, just did it for DC. He also did it to invoke the Alien Enemies Act. He said there was a state of emergency, that we had to do this because there was this crazy invasion of Tren de Aragua, the gang in the United States. And he used that to kidnap and take people off of United States soil without due process. The fiction, both legal and factual, that is created by Donald Trump has to be tested in courts of law. So even though there is an actual section of Home Rule Act of DC that allows him to take over the PD, and even though there is a legal nuance, Katie, that allows Donald Trump to be able to deploy the National Guard in DC, because unlike other jurisdictions in other states, the National Guard in DC actually has always been under the control of the president versus a governor of another state.
Right.
We're keeping our focus in California right now. We know right now in DC, we only see the federal troops, and those people, we see them outrageously patrolling the streets of Georgetown, which, by the way, I was just in Georgetown 2 weeks ago, and there was no bedlam, chaos, and violence. Any major metropolitan city is going to have some measure
Right.
of violence. I think it's ignorant and stupid that he thinks the American public is unintelligent enough to be able to detect that lie. But the reason why I bring up California, Katie, is there is a bench trial that's going on right now in federal court before the brother of former Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer. Judge Breyer in federal court is doing a trial on whether Donald Trump violated the Posse Comitatus Act, which is a law, it's a criminal statute that does not allow the use of federal troops to be able to do civilian law enforcement. There has been a full-blown evidentiary trial over the span of 3 days where they're still having oral arguments, legal arguments right now as you and I are meeting here on Substack. And things that are coming out during that California trial are very telling. One, and I'm looking at my notes, one of the questions that was asked of a Major General Scott Sherman, who was the commander of those National Guard troops back in June when they invaded LA, frankly, is what they did. The California attorney asked this Major General, did you ever hear that there was a, quote, rebellion? To which Major General Scott Sherman answers, not a rebellion, but that there were people preventing federal officials and law enforcement from doing their job and threatening federal buildings. Now, that was a canned response from this guy. But the reason why the word rebellion keeps on coming up in the line of questioning, Katie, is because the Posse Comitatus Act has an exception, which is the Insurrection Act. And Donald Trump could say that because there's a rebellion that he could bring in federal troops. And so there's a reason why we're living in this legal space, because we want to be able to make sure that we hold Donald Trump to account for when he violates the law. And if a federal judge out in California says there was no rebellion, that you didn't need to go beyond local law enforcement to be able to quell
Right.
anything that was going on, then of course our focus then always shifts back then to DC, because we know that Trump is going to try to do this in Baltimore, Chicago, and other blue cities. And so we need to be able to see from a legal lens what's happening in each of these places and what are the legal findings, because that's just going to give more ammunition to those of us that challenge the Trump administration in court.
So are you optimistic this judge is going to, rule against Donald Trump and the Trump administration in California?
I am, and I will remind people that initially an injunction was entered by this judge that was reversed on appeal. But Gavin Newsom, when he sued because of these troops being sent into his state, into the state of California, this judge was like, yeah, I kind of agree that this is what's happening. You need to get these people out of here. And the reality is they parked more federal presence of troops and people in LA, Katie, than they put in Afghanistan back in 2021. And
Insane.
and it's the propaganda. That's what they want. They want to use legal vehicles to be able to spread a propaganda of fear and intimidation.
And they're aided vetted by right-wing media, by the way. So I think that they're largely successful in some of the things they're trying to do. I want to move on to the Epstein story because I know you've been covering the bejesus out of that. On Monday, a federal judge in Manhattan rejected the Trump administration's request. I thought they had done this a while ago to release grand jury transcripts from the DOJ's investigation into Ghislaine Maxwell. You've read the judge's order. By the way, I mean, it's my understanding, you're a lawyer, Katie, so you would know this, that grand jury transcripts are very, very rarely made public, correct?
You're absolutely right. The law militates towards non-disclosure of grand jury records, transcripts, and exhibits.
So you weren't. I'm imagine you weren't surprised that the judge ruled this. I'm curious. I guess it makes the Trump administration appear like they're trying to be transparent, right, by asking for this. And a lot of people don't know how highly unusual it is. But I wonder if you can explain the ruling and anything that stood out to you.
Yeah, so I've called it the head fake of the Trump administration to let the American public believe that this was going to happen, but more importantly, that there would be anything of value should these records have been disclosed to the American public. It is such a worthwhile read, this opinion and order, Katie, that we have, because it's 31 pages and that may sound daunting, but it is such an essential read because this judge could have just summarily denied it and just cited to the law that says we don't usually release grand jury records. But this judge was incredibly thoughtful, and this judge walked through the procedural posture of the case and talked about when the indictments happened, how did they come about, and this judge also said that there was only one federal law enforcement agent that was involved in the presentation of evidence to the grand jury, as is typical with grand juries. So it's not like you would have heard from a parade of witnesses or victims to be able to get some more information. But then the judge also underscores Ghislaine Maxwell's own involvement, her culpability in these crimes. It was not just Epstein. It was Epstein and Maxwell. She not only did these crimes herself, but she facilitated the crimes for Epstein.
But
And then
she
the judge,
also, wait, Katie, sorry to
yeah,
interrupt, but she also participated in some of the crimes. I mean, she
exactly.
actually sexually assaulted or allegedly sexually assaulted some of the victims. So it's not like she was just recruiting these girls. She was actually involved. It's so in assaulting them and abusing them.
Yeah, and I can actually help eliminate the adverb allegedly from this discourse because this went to trial. And a jury of Ghislaine Maxwell's peers convicted her of
Right.
child sex abuse and child sex trafficking. She is deemed to be a convicted child sex predator, which is a whole other issue vis-a-vis her removal from a minimum security camp in Texas. But in the end, this order calls out the Trump administration for exactly what you and I started to talk about, which is this head fake of saying that there was going to be something of value should these records be released. But ultimately, the judge spends a lot of time in this order talking about the victims and the survivors. They have been discarded by the Trump administration along the way. Since the beginning of that sweetheart plea deal between Jeffrey Epstein and the state of Florida, where the feds agreed not to prosecute him in exchange for him pleading guilty to two bullshit misdemeanors in Florida. At the end of the day, the victims and the survivors have not been heard, and they are the most important voices throughout this entire debacle. And the judge, Judge Engelmeyer, made sure that he noted that these victims and these survivors needed to be heard, have not been heard, have not been consulted every step of the way, and have violated the rights of these victims and survivors.
Right.
And I'm
Because
so grateful that he did that.
didn't they change something, Katie, at the DOJ that said that the victims needed to be notified if anything was being released, if anything was happening? I remember I did an interview and someone said there was actually a policy in place that they are not adhering to at
There's
at
the
DOJ.
Well, there's not only DOJ policy, but there's the Crime Victims' Rights Act. There is an actual law that requires that you consult with victims. And the DOJ, in its policies and procedures, has adopted this idea. And it only makes sense, right? Just the humanity of reaching out to somebody, especially if they were a victim of child sex abuse and trafficking. You would think that that would just be the first place you would go. And I was a prosecutor for many years of my career. And the victims, were the ones that we needed to make sure that we got their blessing on things. They didn't necessarily dictate the outcome of what we did on a case, but right as rain, you had to make sure that you consulted with a victim. It was office policy. You had to do that because why would you not give them the buy-in on what happens to the fate of somebody who did something horrifically wrong to them? So now that we see that Maxwell has received some version of a quid pro quo after meeting with Todd Blanche, the Deputy Attorney General, she gets moved. She gets a special waiver by the Federal Bureau of Prisons to be able to go to this camp. And it's a camp. It's literally called a camp in Texas. There are some news reports that she may be eligible for work release, and perhaps she might be able to go off campus to be able to do work release.
But also that the potential of a pardon is kind of hanging in the balance too, Katie, right? Or you think that's never going to happen?
Oh, stranger shit has happened. So you know what? I believe that that is a possibility. The fact that there has been no release of the audio or the transcripts from this meeting dying between her and Todd Blanche, although we do know from ABC's reporting last week that allegedly Maxwell said that there was nothing that, quote, was concerning involving Donald Trump, but Donald Trump didn't do anything, quote, concerning around her. I'm not sure why we would ever think that this woman would be a truth teller or she should be the gold standard for truth when it comes to it, seeing how she herself, to your point, was an active participant in the abuse. But we know that a House Oversight congressional subpoena has been served on the Department of Justice with a return date of August 19th, which is in 6 days.
Yeah, and also
this is going to be interesting.
By 3 Republicans, right?
James Comer, the chair of House Oversight, is the one who signed the subpoena.
Mace.
And Nancy, listen, I will bizarrely say that sometimes we're on the right side of the world with, MAGA on some issues, but we need to see what the DOJ is going to do. According to the DOJ, there may not be anybody left to prosecute and there may not be anything to turn over, although I do think that that's BS, but that doesn't mean that you could ignore a congressional subpoena. And so are you going to ignore a subpoena from your Republican brethren at the House Oversight Committee? We also know that they've had subpoenas for depositions served absurdly to be able to hear from Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton and others about what's happened. Putting aside whether you believe that it makes sense to hear from these people, including Bill Barr and Merrick Garland, whatever, do you know who didn't get a subpoena, Katie? Alex Acosta, the then United States Attorney for the Southern District of Florida, who authorized the sweetheart plea deal with Jeffrey Epstein, who became the Secretary of Labor in Trump 1.0. Why isn't he served with a subpoena to have to come to provide testimony? I look at that discrepancy and it's a huge red flag.
Well, why?
Go ahead.
Why wasn't he? I mean, what's your answer?
Because I think if he had to sit down and explain what went down with the sweetheart plea deal, it would be the implication of a whole lot of people that he doesn't want to be in the hot seat to have to implicate. Period. End of story.
Yeah, but if they want to get to the bottom of it, if they want to get to the bottom of this, if the House Oversight Committee wants to get to the bottom of it, they should be subpoenaing.
But that House Oversight Committee vote was done only after Robert Garcia and Summer Lee teed it up in a way where they had to vote on that subpoena. And I think that is another big tell that there's performative justice that's being sought by Republicans at this point. I think that there is a known, let's throw a dog a bone energy vis-a-vis MAGA land and the fact that people are still demanding transparency even in MAGA land about this. But clearly, everything that happens, when something bad happens, Katie, we see a stupid tariff. When something bad happens, we see something like DC being invaded and federalized. I'm not saying that they're only distractions from Epstein, but I do find this proliferation of stupidity to be something that's directly reactive to this Epstein file issue, which is why I am grateful, no matter how we got there, that there is a House Oversight subpoena and that there are depots that are being teed up. But I do think that and I'll go back to this all day long and all night long. There's one person who's controlling the release of these files, and it's Donald Trump. Pam Bondi will do it if Donald Trump tells him to do it. Any of this stuff by way of depositions, it's not going to make a difference. And if DOJ stonewalls the release of the files, we're back to square one. I just think that, again, a lot of this is performative legally and even from Congress to be able to get information that could just easily be released by Donald Trump.
I have to wrap things up, but
Sure.
yes or no, Katie, do you think we'll ever get the Epstein files, that they'll ever be in the public domain, if you will?
Not with Trump in office.
Okay.
Because Caroline Levin and Donald Trump quickly, in response to Judge Engelmeyer's order, said, quote, because this is the bullshit that they like to perpetrate. We think it's unfortunate. The president wants to see credible evidence released. When you try to sit there and you try to couch it as credible, well, who defines credible? They tried to do that at House Oversight, Katie, and Robert Garcia and Summerlee said, hell to the no. We're not going to add that adjective of credible. Let's just get it all out there. And then in the end, they actually succeeded that for the subpoena. So let's see what happens on August 19th.
All right, Katie, thank you. To be continued. Man, you're smart. You're one smart cookie, Katie. I'm very impressed. Thank you so much. And hopefully we can talk again, because now we're going on to Ukraine and Russia. Thanks,
Oh,
Katie.
gosh.
Great to
Bye.
meet
See you
you.
guys.
Bye.
Thanks, Katie.
All right. As you all know, the war in Ukraine is in its 4th year. There's no end in sight. And I've got Julia Ioffe on deck to talk about that. And I'm trying to do this. Sorry, you guys. Here we go, Julia. And Julia is a reporter for Puck News. She's very smart, and she's going to tell us the implications of this meeting in Alaska on Friday. I've got 6 minutes to talk to Julia. We had some technical difficulties, but now I see Julia. Hi, Julia. Are you there?
Hey, how
Is
are
this your
you?
first Substack?
I think so, yeah.
Well, welcome, and I'm so happy to
Thank you.
see you. It's not a blouse, it's a dress, but thank you very much,
I
Marvel.
love it.
Anyway, Julia, great to see you. I want to talk to you about this meeting with Putin in Alaska, Donald Trump face to face. No, will not include Ukrainian President Zelensky or any representatives from Ukraine. I mean, Julia, what could go wrong? I'm kidding. So, by the way, Julia has a new book coming out in October called Motherland, A Feminist History of Modern Russia from Revolution to Autocracy. I'm going to be talking to her about that when it comes out. But tell us what you think about this meeting on Friday, Julia, because I'm sorry we're going to not have a ton of time because I got to do Governor Hochul. So hit it.
Yeah. Thanks for plugging the book. You could see it right there on the shelf. Yeah, I don't think much is going to come from this meeting, honestly, mostly because they're going to be talking past each other. They have totally different agendas. Donald Trump really wants this meeting because he wants to mix metaphors, right? He wants to get the feather in his cap, get the points on the board. He wants the deal so he can get the Nobel Peace Prize, which he's obsessed with in the same way he was obsessed with being Times Man of the Year. Like
And
it's his
obsessed with
weird
receiving
image
a
thing.
Kennedy Center honors, but go on.
Right. He just has these kind of ticks and these things that he really wants to have. But Putin wants everything. And he doesn't need this meeting. And this is something I've seen. I've been watching and reading Russian media propaganda all week. And they're just like, listen, Trump really wants this meeting. I guess we'll give it to him. And the mood in Moscow is, we're breaking through on the battlefield. We're making gains. We don't need this meeting. Trump does. And if this means the end of our kind of encirclement and our banishment from the West, great. And and what I'm hearing is that they have no interest in stopping the war, that even if they are able to get to an understanding or a deal on Friday, they won't, Putin won't end the war. People are saying, okay, we'll do a ceasefire for a few weeks or a few months, but we'll go right back to fighting because we're not done. And
Well,
what we need to get done, we'll do on the battlefield.
Well, I think a lot of people are worried, European leaders, obviously Zelensky, that somehow Putin is going to talk Trump into ceding land to Russia and basically changing sort of what is Russia and what is Ukraine's. And do you think that in any way that could happen. There are all these kind of guarantees that apparently Donald Trump is supposed to adhere to. That a ceasefire is a prerequisite. Any territorial discussions have to start from the current front lines. Binding Western security guarantees that Russia must accept. Ukraine's participation in any further talks. Support for both the U.S. and Europe, including Ukraine, support from for any deal. So there are all these things that are kind of these guardrails. But do you think that Putin, I mean, you've covered Putin for years now, will have the ability to somehow bamboozle Donald Trump into giving more territory back to Russia in exchange for a ceasefire or ending the war altogether?
Maybe, but I don't think he'll end the war altogether. And I think again, what I'm hearing in Russia is that, or from Russia, I'm not in Russia, but what I'm hearing is that, you know, we don't need a ceasefire. The Ukrainians do and the Americans do. And we'll dangle one in front of them if we can get what we can get. But we're not interested in a ceasefire and we'll break it as soon as we need to. I think Trump might try, but I think inevitably, my feeling is that it's just going to be more of the same. That they'll have a crazy meeting, some crazy details will come out of it. Trump will use a bunch of superlatives to describe the meeting and Putin himself, but nothing really will come of it. Neither an end to the war or nor a ceasefire, nor any kind of repercussions for Russia. You know, just a couple hours ago, Trump said that he will impose severe consequences on Russia if there's no deal on Friday. I don't think there's going to be a deal on Friday, but I also don't think that there will be consequences.
What do you think Putin and high-ranking people in Russia think of Donald Trump, Julia?
I think they think of him as potentially useful, as a kind of useful idiot. And they're glad to be dealing with him rather than with Biden or Obama because they think that he is a pragmatist like Putin, that he's not ideological, and that he just wants to make money and make deals. And that's somebody they can potentially work with. But, if they can't make a deal with him, that's fine. They'll just keep fighting.
Well, there was a time not too long ago when foreign policy, Julia, was conducted so differently than what we've been witnessing recently. When you look at how this meeting with Putin was arranged, this Stephen Witkoff apparently reportedly not really understanding the different regions of Ukraine, just kind of being woefully uneducated and inexperienced in foreign policy, and how this administration really approaches foreign policy in general. What do you think of it all?
I think that's the goal. I think that's not a glitch. That's the design. I've totally mangled the expression, but that's what MAGA wants because for as long as we've had a MAGA, they've been saying, look, you've had all these foreign policy experts, you've had quote unquote the way things are supposed to be done. And what has it gotten us? It has not gotten us much of anything. It has not gotten the American people much of anything except for two forever wars. And so what is the point of it all? Throw it all overboard, try something new. And again, I think America at this moment is this kind of spoiled kid who is rich, comfortable, hasn't ever been invaded really, and is like, whatever, I'm a little bit uncomfortable, so I'm going to tear the whole thing down.
Well,
Just to try something new.
It's going to be fascinating to follow this meeting, what happens, everything from the body language to the sentiment that, that's used to describe the encounter. So, Julia, thank you for doing this. And how's your baby?
Oh my God. He is so good. He is just the best. He'll turn 10 months old on Friday also. So that to me will be the more significant event on Friday.
I understand. Well, listen, it's always great to see you.
Thank you,
And
Katie.
let's do it again sometime. Thank you, Julia.
Absolutely. Thank you, Katie.
Okay, for our final
Bye.
guest is Governor Kathy Hochul. How about that, you all? We got a governor on Substack. Oh, wait, here we go. Did I screw this up? Huh? Julia's still there. There's Julia. Oh, no, you got to X out, Julia. Hi, Governor Hochul.
How are
Hold
you,
on.
Katie?
I'm Xing Julia out. Hold on. There you go. Hi.
How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you so much for doing this Substack conversation. I really appreciate it.
Happy to, Katie.
First and foremost, gosh, we have a lot to cover, but I wanted to start by asking you about the redistricting battle that is really dominating headlines in recent days. Texas obviously is front and center in this battle. In a recent op-ed in the Houston Chronicle, you called Texas redistricting a quote, legal insurrection, and said Democrats should fight fire with fire. Talk about this piece, why you were inspired to write it, and what you really meant by calling it a legal insurrection.
Well, first of all, Katie, we didn't start this fight. I want you to know that if the Republicans did not take orders from Donald Trump the way Greg Abbott appears to be willing to do, Donald Trump told him to find me 5 Republican seats, we wouldn't have to be dealing with this. But yes, once again, we're being distracted and have to be taken off our jobs to be able to fight what we're doing here against Donald Trump and this legal insurrection, which means they're trying to take over our capital in a way that I find abhorrent. I mean, this is violating all the rules, all the norms, the protocols, and the way we've done redistricting for decades, which is every 10 years based on census data. And yes, some states don't have restrictions on political gerrymandering. We do in New York. But I'm tired of having these battles against Republicans with one hand tied behind my back. It is not a fair fight anymore. So we're taking this on. And I also believe that the motivation for what Donald Trump is doing right now, the master of distraction, they saw the polls for next year's congressional races. They saw that in 2026, based on their failed policies, that they stand to lose countless seats in the House of Representatives. Hakeem Jeffries from the great state of New York will become the speaker. And finally, we'll have a firewall to stop the insanity. They know that's going to happen under the current rules. That's why they're rigging the system. And that's why I had to write this to talk about what we see happening, not just in Texas, but now Florida, Missouri, and they're going around the country just cherry picking states that they think they can, kowtow to them. And Democratic governors in this moment need to stand up. And that's exactly what I'm doing.
Well, but I mean, how successful will the Republicans be if they cherry pick and, do it in all of these states that you just mentioned, Governor? And I know that New York and California and Illinois have said, the governors of those states, including yourself, have said, we're going to fight fire with fire. We're going to do the same thing. But in New York, you have to change the state constitution in order to do it. So you're not going to be able to do it by the time the midterms happen.
Not this 2026. Unlike California and a number of other states, we have constraints in our constitution. Literally, they were changed just in 2014. This does not go back to the beginning of our state. This is a change that was put into law in 2014 as a good government reform, that we take the partisan politics out of basically politics, which is fine if everybody's doing the same, Katie, but they're not. And now we're seriously disadvantaged. So what we have as an option is to make changes to the law the next 2 consecutive sessions of the legislature. We'll do that exactly in 26 and 27. And we can put it to the voters. The voters of New York will have the final say. This has to go to ballot. So you're correct. I can't do this by this 2026, but certainly by 2028, far earlier than 2032, which is how the normal process would be. Now, I said this on Fox News the other day. I went into the belly of the beast and said to them, if Texas wants to have a good old-fashioned Texas standoff, you lay down your weapons, we'll all lay down ours, and let's just get back to the normal world that we once inherited until Donald Trump decided he needed to have this brazen power grab and dominate our states. They have to stand down on this. Otherwise, who knows where this will end? But New Yorkers are not going to sit on the sidelines when this unfolds. History will judge us harshly if we don't stand up and call out what this is and do everything in our power, as I'm willing to do, to stop this insanity.
Well, I'm sure you and Governor Pritzker and Gavin Newsom and other blue state governors are crunching the numbers, right, Governor Hochul? So let's say the Trump administration puts pressure on all these red states, right? And they do redistricting. And you all do the same in some blue states. Where does it all shake out? I mean, will the Republicans be able to redistrict enough that they are able to maintain control of the House of Representatives?
Well, they certainly think they can, correct? I mean, they wouldn't be going down this path if they didn't think they'd be successful. They did not count on Democratic governors who've always been constrained by the norms and following the good government process. We have an independent redistricting system in the state of New York, which sounds good on paper, but I'm dealing in the political reality of that this is not a fair fight. And that's why they didn't count on us standing up and saying, well, we'll change our laws. Gavin Newsom can do it sooner with a special session. I don't have that ability, but I can get our Constitution changed. And they should know this. So where does it end, Katie? It ends when Democrats have enough power to take back the House, have the majority in Washington, and we can get back to what the Democrats proposed just a few years ago, which is to make it fair all across the country, where every state has no political system that does this. They have independent redistricting commissions. So I'm willing to do that. That's the ideal.
But where it sits now, sorry, and I don't even know if you know the answer to this, but where we sit now, is it, I think Democrats and people who are upset with the Trump administration's agenda, they're counting on the midterms to finally put some brakes on what is happening. But could it conceivably be, could the results conceivably be gerrymandered to the extent that they do retain control of the House and the Senate?
I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know how successful their efforts will be or our efforts will be, but heaven forbid we sit on the sidelines during this fight. And I won't do that. But I also can tell you this. I will continue doing what I did last year in the 2024 elections. We had 7 battleground races either way for members of the House of Representatives. We worked together. I worked so hard with Hakeem Jeffries and Democrats and the party, and I raised money, and I was out there opening up field offices and hiring extra people. We won 5 out of 7 of those seats, going against the national trend. So I'm engaged right now. I plan on winning our seats, taking out more Republicans in 2026 the old-fashioned way, under the rules that New York has. So I'm not surrendering. And I'll be back in the fight, continuing what we have to do to be ready for 2028. So I got to look at a little bit of the long game here. I've been a student of history, been doing this a long time, elected official most of my adult life. And this is a moment we must stand up, because all this hand-wringing on the sidelines, we don't have any power. You know what? Sometimes if you dig deep enough, you'll find you have that power. And it's going to be tough. But there are no alternatives, Katie. There are no alternatives.
Let me switch gears, if I could, Governor, and ask you about Donald Trump's move to put the National Guard in the District of Columbia and D.C. police under federal control. Statistics show the crime rate is down. I'm curious to hear your response to this move.
It's absurd. Again, another blatant power grab. And guess what he's doing? He's deflecting attention from the redistricting battle now, right? I mean, what are we talking about today? Redistricting is still top of mind for us, but he's so masterful and he gets away with this, where he just throws all kinds of things up on the wall and sees where our attention will go. I said from the beginning, I'm not going to follow him down a rabbit hole every time he does something crazy, because that'll be every single hour. But I'll fight him hard when it affects New York State. What he's doing in Washington is wrong. I lived in Washington for a decade. I worked for Senator Moynihan when I was a staffer. Then I ended up being a member of Congress myself. I have seen a dramatic change in the crime rates in that city. They fought back hard. And when I said, if this comes to New York City, which he has also threatened, I said, that'll be disrespecting the men and women in uniform, nearly 35,000 NYPD officers who are patrolling our streets, who are making New York City, and it is the biggest, biggest safe city in America, safest big city in America. So Washington, D.C., the statistics tell a different story from what the president would have you believe, and it's just wrong. But again, it's deflection. Take the
And
shiny
what if
object and move it somewhere else. Everybody's following that shiny object. We have to stop.
what would your reaction be if Donald Trump threatens to send National Guard troops to New York City?
Well, first of all, I'd call him up. I would call him and say, Mr. President, I just want to show you, can you look at these statistics on our crime rates? We had the safest subway system in record since we started keeping track in the month of July. Our serious crimes are down dramatically. I actually have had National Guard in the subways a year and a half ago when the crimes rates were going up, not to police, not to arrest people, but to stand there as a deterrent. Crime rates plummeted in the subways, and the subways have 6 million people a day. So that's the city of Los Angeles has 4 million people. We had 4 to 6 crimes a day in our subways. So if you had a major city with 4 to 6 crimes a day, serious crimes, you would think that's pretty safe, right? So I'll talk to the president first and say, Mr. President, you're a New Yorker. We've got this. Please don't respect the men and women of the police department. That's not fair to them. They work hard. They're doing their jobs. But if it comes down to it, Katie, my view is I run the National Guard. I'm the commander-in-chief of the National Guard here in the state of New York. I need them for natural disasters, of which there's one almost every week, it seems. And I need them available to do some of the policing when I direct it. But that is my prerogative. It is my decision as the commander-in-chief, not his. If they need to be deployed to go to Afghanistan, you call them up militarily, yes, that is your prerogative. We do that. We're all over the world. But when it comes to domestic use of the National Guard, that should be the prerogative of the governor.
Let's talk about tariffs, because I know that you're interested and have been studying and monitoring the impact of tariffs closely. Tell us what your administration is doing, and I'm curious. Someone was asking this question on social: how are the Trump administration's new tariffs impacting New Yorkers, and what are you hearing from your constituents on this?
Katie, it's devastating. We are impacted more than just about any other state. Look how large our border is. We follow 2 Great Lakes all the way up to the St. Lawrence Seaway. Geographically, Canada is on the border with us. It's not a foreign country. There's a synergy. They support our tourism activities. Our farmers sell products to them. They sell us products like lumber for our houses and steel and aluminum. So just Canada alone, we have a trade relationship of $50 billion. They're not coming here anymore. It's hurting our tourism industry dramatically. Children's museums, where I took my little first granddaughter to just a few weeks ago in Buffalo. It was extraordinary to go there. And I said, how are you doing here, this little museum? They said, we're being clobbered because the Canadians won't come here anymore. We normally have 2,000 Canadians a month. They had 40 people come. Go up to Saranac Lake and Lake Placid. They're not what they should be in the summer. So number one, it's affecting tourism. That affects sales tax. They're not coming here to shop. It's not helping our small businesses. But also, I was just in a bodega this afternoon, walking around, looking at the prices, talking to the owner, talking to customers. The owner says, I don't know what to do. My prices are going up and they're going to get even worse. I don't want to pass this on to my customers, but I have no choice. I'm already living on the margins here. So prices are going to go up. And what was that promise we heard in 2024 for the election? Prices will go down on day one. They didn't go down. They're going way up. So the cost for families that are already struggling, what I can do, I've done this year. I've focused intensely on affordability. I found a path to put $5,000 back in New York families' pockets, a $1,000 tax credit, a middle-class tax cut, an inflation rebate. We now cover the full cost of school breakfasts and lunches. So an average family around making on about $150,000, they're going to have $5,000 back in their pockets because of the policies that I enacted just a few months ago. But here's the problem. I put $5,000 in. The tariffs take out anywhere from $4,000 to $6,000. So again, the families are getting screwed. They're not getting ahead. So I'll keep leaning hard into affordability. I've been on this since I became governor 4 years ago. But it is so hard for me to accept that our federal government is working against the people, many of them who voted for them. It's just wrong.
You mentioned affordability, Governor, and I want to touch on the New York mayoral race because Zohran Mamdani, his platform really was that New York City is simply too expensive. And I know that some of your fellow Democrats have endorsed him: Senator Elizabeth Warren, Congressman Jerry Nadler, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, New York Attorney General Letitia James. But you've been pretty non-committal. You've said we've had differences. I don't know how you whitewash that away. You can agree with me, and many people agree with me, and many people, I think it's not just Democrats who say New Yorkers stand up for our rights. So I guess the question is, I don't want to read your whole quote on this. Um, what what are your biggest concerns, and why aren't you endorsing him?
I will give him enormous credit for focusing the attention of the media and the public on affordability, something I've been championing and fighting for and been successful in for a while. But we still have a long way to go. He is absolutely right that we need to do more on affordable housing. I'm working on policies that will do just that, but it takes a while to build housing. He's right about the cost of everyday living and grocery stores and the cost of transportation. So if he becomes the mayor, I will roll up my sleeves and work closely with him on this shared agenda. But at this point, it's still August. The election's a few months away, and I want to have more conversations about the concerns I have on making sure the Jewish community here in New York City feels safe. They don't right now. They want to make sure that they're going to be protected. And
He,
there's
I mean, he has addressed that, as you know. He has said that he's going to have a special commission to fight anti-Semitism, that he's very aware of that. So,
he's
he has talked about that.
no, there's definitely progress being made, and I'm having those conversations as well. So, um, there's a lot of people who do what they feel pressure to do. People who know me know I never get pressured into anything. I will be ready to do what I want to do at the right time.
Okay. Well, when you decide what you're going to do, I hope you'll call me and we can have another conversation about this. But before we wrap up, and I know we're under a time crunch, but I wanted to ask you about the statewide smartphone ban in schools that you implemented earlier this year. Can you just talk to us about it? Because I can't understand why all schools all across the country don't ban cell phones during school hours. It just seems like such a no-brainer to me.
Well said, Katie. You're absolutely right. And I didn't think, as the governor, I'm not responsible for education policy. We have a separate, uh, you know, school superintendent who does that. I said, wait a minute. I saw what was happening. I'm the New York's first mom governor. We see things very differently. And when I went around the state and talked to teenagers about their mental health, how they're feeling about things, it's declining. I mean, these kids are under enormous stress. And I talked to countless young people and parents and teachers. Teachers are frustrated because they're competing. The math teacher's competing with TikTok dance videos. Guess what's winning out? So
Yeah.
the educational process is not working. Kids are under peer pressure all day long. They're getting mocked out for what they're wearing, and the girls aren't being invited to the meeting in the girls' bathroom, and they feel really bad. And
I mean, it's terrible, but it's also, I mean, you're right. I think the number one issue, there's so many issues, and suicide rates among young girls have gone up. Somebody just commented the parents are the problem because I think parents have a hard time,
yeah,
setting boundaries for their kids. I probably speak from experience on that, but the big problem is they can't learn. They're in
that's
school to learn,
that's
and you can't when you're distracted and you're focused on other things.
right. And so you talk to students from a school we had one in New York that already 2 years ago had the ban. I sat with their students just a few days ago. I wanted to find out how that went. Transition is hard in the beginning. It's breaking in. You're smoking cigarettes one day and the next day you can't. I mean, it's an addiction, right? It's an addiction. So parents need to step up now in New York and start getting their kids ready for this transition. Have cell phone free days at home. Definitely not during mealtime. I mean, start getting the kids outside and talking to them about why this is so devastatingly bad for them, and they can do it on their own, but not during the school time. So you're absolutely right. I wish every governor could do this. Every school should do it on their own, but there's enormous peer pressure on even school districts and school boards, and none of them wanted to be uh, in the line of fire to do this. I said, you know what? I'm the governor. I'm a mom. I'll take the heat. Blame me if anybody's unhappy, because I know ultimately we're going to have healthier young people, more well adjusted. And Katie, what I heard from these kids who finally had cell phone free experience in school, They said I have my first friends in person. I never had a friend in person. They used to sit during lunchtime, not even talking to people at the same table. The noises are there. Kids are shouting and talking, and it's alive again. And I just want to give them back their childhood. And so New York should not be one of the few states that does this. We are the largest, bell to bell, all day long. None of this even pulling it out during gym class or study hall. No, complete freedom. And they're going to be more well adjusted. And as adults, when they emerge from high school, they're going to know how to communicate in person, make eye contact. What a rare art that is in schools these days. So this is going to be transformational. Our kids will be smarter, happier, and this is going to be a great outcome for a long battle that I've taken on. And I just hope more people follow suit.
Have you gotten any pushback from families? I think one of the big arguments against this is, well, what if there's a school shooting? I mean, this is sort of the world we live in, and I need to get in touch with my kid. I talked to Jonathan Haidt about this, and I get, but I guess some parents are concerned about and probably helicopter or now snowplow parents, right? That they can't be in constant communication with their kids.
It's an addiction for the parents too. I mean, one first grade teacher told me that every single child in first grade had a smartwatch on. And so mommy and daddy could ask how they're doing all day. How are you doing, sweetie? I miss you. I miss you. You know what you're doing to that child? You're not cutting the umbilical cord. And I understand, I'm a mom. I would want to do that, but I also know it's not the best thing for my kids. And so if there is a school shooting, Katie, because my kids were little during Columbine, and that is like the worst nightmare of any parents. What I learned was, and convinced me a year and a half ago when I first heard this, police officers, sheriffs, district attorneys all said this: if there is a school shooting going on, the last thing you want for your child to have is their cell phone to go off and tell the shooter where they are if they're in hiding. Okay, think about that. Also, if they're sending messages to each other, calling their parents, and videoing the information and posting it, and then the police end up going to the wrong place based on that information, the smartest thing in that crisis is for all the eyes to be on the front of the classroom. The teacher is highly trained. They go through constant drills. Follow that leader to safety. Don't be on your own, fumbling around for your cell phone, trying to talk to your parents, because you have a higher chance of surviving that than if you do with your cell phone in your hand. And that's just the cold-hearted reality of that concept that we don't even want to contemplate. But it's better for the kids. So parents, I didn't believe it either, and now I do.
Yeah, well, it totally makes sense. I'm so happy you did it for all these kids who are in school to learn not to watch TikTok videos or talk to their friends or their parents. And, I've done a lot of stories about how distracting it is, and you can't really multitask. There's no such thing as multitasking. And so I'm really happy you've done this. I know we're out of time. I don't want your team to be mad at me. So, Governor Hochul, thank you so much for spending time. I hope we can do this again on Substack. And it's been a real pleasure talking to you.
Katie, I've admired your career from the very beginning. My days always started with you. So love you and appreciate what you're doing for us. Take care.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Thanks, Governor.
Okay, bye-bye.
Okay, bye. Okay, I want to remove. Oh, see, I didn't remove the participant earlier. Hi, everyone. So we're going to do a little debrief and just kind of chat together. I saw my husband joined, and I'm kind of now self-conscious. Molnar, go do something else. Watch golf or something, will you? So we're calling this. Oh, we're doing this as a new live. Yeah. I'm sorry, you guys. I'm all screwed up. So we're gonna sign off, right? Yeah. And then we're gonna come back and we're just gonna chat for a few minutes. And I'm gonna get your questions and kind of give you my point of view and my take on what's happening in the world. So thank you guys for watching. As always, thank you to my incredible team who helped organize these interviews and prepare me, because it's complicated and takes a village. And, one thing, like if there's something going on in the world and you all want me to do an interview about it, just tell me, because this is why I'm here. It's to be your conduit to people who have expertise in various areas and who can talk about certain issues. So, Molnar, get the hell out of here. I'm kidding. Come on. You can actually come in here. He's in the bedroom. I'm in my office. And I'll see you guys shortly. So join me for this little debrief, Katie After Hours. I might get a cocktail. Why not? And I'll talk to you later. Okay. Bye.